This rivalry will shape the 21st century. It spans the Himalayas to the Indian Ocean, from deserts reborn to megacities rising overnight. Two nations carry over one-third of humanity, India and China. Both are ancient civilizations reclaiming a place in history. But look at their transformations. The contrast is staggering. China builds at a pace the modern world hasn't seen. Entire cities rose from empty land in under a decade. Rail lines cut through mountains once deemed impassable. Bridges now soar over canyons deeper than towers are tall. Dams generate more power than some countries use in a year. These projects signal ambition and redefine what's possible. Meanwhile, India, despite having extraordinary engineering talent, one of the youngest populations on Earth, and an economy growing at historic speed, still struggles with traffic congestion, uneven infrastructure, overloaded railways, and projects that can take years just to secure approval. So how did these two nations, which started from relatively similar levels of poverty after independence, end up on such different engineering trajectories? Why did China become the undisputed king of mega projects while India moved more slowly and more unevenly? And perhaps more importantly, what does this reveal about politics, culture, economics, national identity, and the way societies organize power? The answer lies in systems. It is about how governments make decisions, how societies tolerate sacrifice, how capital is deployed, and how engineering became one of the most powerful expressions of national ambition in human history. In this video, we are going to travel through the mountains of Tibet, across China's vast high-speed rail network, into India's booming cities, through giant ports, deserts transformed into green ecosystems, and deep into the geopolitical rivalry reshaping Asia. And by the end of it, you will understand why engineers around the world are paying very close attention to what is happening between these two countries right now. If you enjoy deep dives into mega projects, infrastructure, geopolitics, and the hidden systems shaping our world, make sure to subscribe and check the links in the description for additional sources, maps, books, and documentaries. Because this is not just the story of India and China, this is the story of how the future is being built. In 1947, India became independent from Britain. 2 years later, in 1949, Mao Zedong declared the founding of the People's Republic of China. There are few similarities at this point between both countries. Both emerged from poverty, had massive populations, and both believed the future depended on modernization. But from the very beginning, they chose radically different paths. India became a democracy. China became a one-party communist state. India embraced debate. China embraced centralized control. India built institutions slowly. China mobilized at enormous scale. And those differences would shape every road, bridge, port, and railway built over the next 75 years. In the 1950s, both countries were poor agrarian societies. China's GDP per capita was among the lowest on Earth. India's was not much better. But then came a turning point. After Mao's disastrous Great Leap Forward and the chaos of the Cultural Revolution, China pivoted. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping launched economic reforms that transformed the country into the manufacturing center of the world. Special economic zones exploded along the coast. Factories multiplied. Foreign investment poured in. And hundreds of millions of people moved from villages into rapidly expanding cities. This created something China had never seen before: a gigantic tax base, a massive industrial workforce, and the financial power to build at historic scale. India, meanwhile, liberalized much later. Its major economic reforms did not begin until 1991. By then, China already had a huge head start. The earlier you build ports, highways, railways, and power systems, the easier it becomes to build even more. Infrastructure creates growth. Growth creates money. Money builds more infrastructure. China entered that cycle decades earlier than India, and once momentum began, the gap widened fast. To understand why China has pulled so far ahead in infrastructure, you first have to understand the scale of the machine it built. Modern China does not approach construction the way most countries do. It approaches construction the way an industrial civilization approaches manufacturing. Projects are not treated as isolated achievements. They are components of a long-term national strategy tied directly to economic growth, political legitimacy, military strength, and global influence. And once that system began accelerating in the late 20th century, it created momentum unlike anything the world had ever seen. Today, China possesses more high-speed rail than the rest of the planet combined. More than 48,000 kilometers of dedicated lines connect cities across mountains, deserts, and densely populated coastal regions. Some trains now reach test speeds above 450 kilometers per hour, moving so quickly that they begin to blur the line between rail and aviation. But the truly astonishing part is not just the speed of the trains, it is the speed at which the network itself was built. Entire corridors that would take decades to approve elsewhere were planned, financed, and completed in only a few years. Cities that once felt distant became connected in ways that fundamentally changed how people lived, worked, and moved. And this same philosophy extends far beyond rail. China's megaprojects increasingly feel less like isolated pieces of infrastructure and more like evidence of a civilization attempting to redesign geography itself. Take the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. At 55 kilometers long, it crosses one of the busiest shipping regions on Earth. But because massive cargo vessels still needed uninterrupted access, engineers designed part of the crossing to disappear beneath the sea itself through an undersea tunnel, connected by artificial islands built in open water. Or consider the Huajiang Canyon Bridge in Guizhou Province. Hanging 625 meters above the river below, it is so high that the landscape beneath it begins to look abstract. A journey that once took 4 hours through mountain roads now takes only minutes. Then there is the Sichuan-Tibet Railway, one of the most extreme railway projects ever attempted. Much of the route sits above 3,000 meters in altitude, while crossing fault lines, avalanche zones, glaciers, and terrain so unstable that many engineers once considered large-scale rail construction impossible there. And yet China kept building mega-projects. Mega-projects are physical proof that the country has overcome centuries of weakness and humiliation. They are demonstrations of national power, symbols of technological sophistication, and reminders to both domestic audiences and foreign rivals that China intends to operate at civilizational scale. That mindset explains why the country continues pushing into projects so large they almost sound fictional. The Yarlung Tsangpo Megadam in Tibet, for example, is projected to become the largest hydroelectric project in human history. Estimated to cost around $170 billion, the system could generate roughly 300 terawatt-hours of electricity every year, several times more than the already colossal Three Gorges Dam. To put that into perspective, the project could produce more electricity annually than entire industrialized countries consume. And what makes all of this possible is not just money, but coordination. China's political system allows the state to mobilize banks, construction firms, provincial governments, supply chains, and labor forces at extraordinary speed. State-owned enterprises specialize in giant infrastructure delivery. Local governments compete to attract investment and hit growth targets. Universities produce huge numbers of engineers who feed directly into industrial sectors. This has resulted into a feedback loop where infrastructure creates growth. Growth creates capital, and capital funds even larger infrastructure. Over time, that cycle became one of the most powerful development engines in modern history. But India did not fail to build, it simply built differently. India is often compared unfairly to China. China is an authoritarian state. India is the largest democracy in human history. That changes everything. In China, a village can disappear for a dam. In India, land acquisition can take years of lawsuits, protests, political negotiations, and environmental challenges. China can move millions of people by state order. India must navigate elections, courts, coalition politics, local identities, linguistic diversity, and federal power struggles. China has one ruling party. India has many. China can prioritize efficiency. India must constantly balance efficiency against representation. And yet, despite these constraints, India has still achieved extraordinary engineering successes. The Delhi Metro transformed urban transit and became one of the most respected metro systems in the world. India built one of the world's largest highway expansion programs. Its Aadhaar digital ID system connected over 1 billion people into a unified digital infrastructure. Its Unified Payments Interface, UPI, processes billions of digital transactions every month. ISRO sent spacecraft to Mars and the Moon at astonishingly low costs. India's Chandrayaan-3 mission landed near the Moon's South Pole in 2023, something only a handful of nations have ever accomplished. But India's strengths often lie in software, frugal engineering and services. China's strengths lie in manufacturing, heavy industry, and physical infrastructure. That distinction matters. India produces elite engineers, but many of them leave. Silicon Valley is filled with Indian talent. China, by contrast, built gigantic industrial ecosystems at home. Steel, concrete, machine tools, shipbuilding, rare earth refining, battery production, solar panels, high-speed rail manufacturing. China became the workshop of the world, and mega projects require industrial depth. You cannot build thousands of kilometers of rail cheaply unless you produce rails, trains, electrical systems, cement, and heavy machinery domestically. India often imports key components or struggles with fragmented supply chains. Then there is bureaucracy. India's bureaucracy is legendary, and it slows projects dramatically. A highway can take years before construction even begins. China still has corruption too, but its system often pushes projects through regardless. India's system forces negotiation, and negotiation takes time. Nowhere is the engineering rivalry between India and China more visible than the Himalayas. The border between the two countries stretches roughly 3,500 kilometers across some of the harshest terrain on Earth. This is not just a frontier, it is a giant engineering contest. After the 1962 Sino-Indian War, China recognized something critical. Infrastructure is military power. Roads move troops, railways move equipment, airfields project force, tunnels maintain logistics year-round. China rapidly expanded infrastructure across Tibet. By 2023, Tibet had over 120,000 kilometers of roads. Railways crossed high-altitude plateaus once considered impossible to traverse. Entire villages were constructed near disputed borders. Airbases, bridges, tunnels, and dual-use infrastructure transformed the region. India eventually responded. It accelerated border roads, built tunnels through mountains, expanded airstrips, improved logistics. But once again, China moved faster. Why? Money, industrial capacity, and centralized planning. China can pour enormous resources into strategic regions because it possesses one of the largest, state-directed financial systems ever created. India must constantly prioritize. China's GDP is now roughly 5 times larger than India's in nominal terms. That financial difference translates directly into engineering power, and the implications are enormous. China did not stop building at home. It exported the model. The Belt and Road Initiative became the largest infrastructure strategy of the modern era. Ports in Sri Lanka, railways in Africa, highways in Central Asia, energy projects in Pakistan, industrial parks across the developing world. Critics call it debt diplomacy. Supporters call it development, but regardless of interpretation, the scale is undeniable. China realized something most great powers understand. Infrastructure creates influence. If your companies build another country's ports, railways, telecom systems, and power grids, you gain leverage. Trade routes begin to depend on you. Standards begin to follow your systems, and engineering becomes geopolitics. India has attempted regional infrastructure projects too, but its financial and industrial scale remains smaller. China can mobilize state-owned enterprises capable of building mega projects almost anywhere on Earth. India's firms are growing, but they do not yet operate at comparable global scale, and this matters because the 21st century may ultimately belong not just to countries with strong militaries, but to countries capable of building systems, energy systems, transport systems, digital systems, supply chains, cities, and now increasingly, climate infrastructure. But China's rise came with enormous costs. The same centralized power that enables rapid construction can also suppress opposition. Entire communities have been relocated for dams, historic neighborhoods demolished, environmental damage ignored. The Three Gorges Dam alone displaced more than 1 million people. China's industrial boom produced severe air pollution, contaminated rivers, and ecological destruction, and some mega projects remain controversial. The Yarlung-Shangpo Dam worries India because it sits upstream on a river system critical to millions of people downstream. Water infrastructure is never just engineering, it is geopolitics. Yet China is also investing heavily in green infrastructure. It dominates solar panel manufacturing, leads the world in electric vehicle production, builds giant renewable energy systems, and has undertaken massive desert greening projects. More than 66 billion trees have reportedly been planted across anti-desertification campaigns. Large regions of previously barren land now host solar farms, greenhouses, and agricultural projects. Critics question long-term sustainability. Supporters call it one of the largest ecological engineering efforts in human history. India faces environmental challenges too. Rapid urbanization strains water systems, air pollution in cities like Delhi is severe, climate change threatens agriculture and monsoon patterns, and India must modernize while still lifting hundreds of millions of people into higher living standards. Both countries are attempting something historically unprecedented, industrializing at massive scale, in an era of climate crisis. No civilization has ever tried this before. There is also a cultural dimension to this story. In both China and India, engineering carries enormous prestige. Families push children toward technical fields. Engineers are symbols of upward mobility, but the systems producing them are different. China invested massively in manufacturing-oriented engineering education. Technical universities align closely with industrial policy. Graduates fed directly into state-backed mega projects. India produced world-class software engineers and mathematicians. The Indian Institutes of Technology became globally respected, but India's broader education system remains uneven. Many graduates lack access to advanced industrial ecosystems. China graduates huge numbers of engineers every year and increasingly retains them domestically. India often loses talent abroad. And there is another key difference: social trust in state-led development. In China, many citizens accepted rapid transformation in exchange for rising living standards. In India, skepticism towards centralized authority is stronger. That slows projects, but it also protects freedoms. This is the central tension of the comparison. China's system is faster. India's system is messier. China's model excels at execution. India's model preserves pluralism. One optimizes for speed, the other optimizes for negotiation, and engineering reflects those values. The gap between China and India is still enormous, but it may not remain static forever. India is growing rapidly. Manufacturing investment is increasing. Apple and other companies are diversifying supply chains away from China. India is expanding ports, highways, and railways. The Mumbai-Ahmedabad bullet train project represents a symbolic shift toward modern high-speed infrastructure. Renewable energy deployment is accelerating. Digital infrastructure is expanding at remarkable speed. And demographically, India now has one major advantage: youth. China's population is aging. Its workforce is shrinking. India remains younger, potentially more dynamic, but demographics alone do not guarantee success. India still faces enormous obstacles: infrastructure deficits, urban congestion, education inequality, water stress, political polarization, and the challenge of creating enough jobs for millions entering the workforce each year. Meanwhile, China already possesses mature industrial ecosystems built over decades. Even as growth slows, the foundation remains immense. The reality is that India may never replicate China's exact path, and perhaps it shouldn't, because the Chinese model depends heavily on centralized political control. India's democracy fundamentally changes what is possible. The more realistic question is whether India can create its own infrastructure model, one capable of balancing democracy with execution, representation with speed, growth with stability. That may be one of the defining engineering and political challenges of the century. In the end, this story is not simply about which country built more bridges, or who has faster trains, or bigger dams. It is about how civilizations organize power. China outbuilt India because it combined centralized authority, industrial policy, manufacturing scale, state financing, nationalism, and long-term strategic planning into one enormous construction machine. Because mega projects are not just concrete and steel, they are reflections of political systems, culture of priorities, and what societies are willing to sacrifice. China's rise proves what centralized states can achieve at incredible scale. India's struggle reveals the complexity of building a modern superpower inside a democracy of over 1 billion people. Because in the 21st century, engineering is no longer just about construction, it is about civilization itself. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to subscribe and check the links in the description for maps, sources, books, documentaries, and additional reading. And let me know in the comments, which country do you think is better positioned for the future? China with its unmatched execution and industrial power, or India with its democracy, demographics, and growing technological influence? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next deep dive into the world's greatest engineering stories.